Okay, easy does it. Left hand steady on the wheel, right foot feathering the brake. Inch by agonizing inch. Check the driver's side mirror. Yep, tire still comfortably within the chalk line I drew myself this morning. 6 solid inches inside my property line. Check the passenger side. Plenty of room between my sensible 4-door sedan and the vast, empty expanse of, well, also my property. Glance at the rear view. 3, maybe 4 feet clear of the sidewalk curb. Perfect. Legal. Unimpeachable. A parking job Michelangelo would weep over. Or so you'd think. Are you serious right now, Dave? Again? Like clockwork. I swear she has sensors buried under her prize-winning petunias, tripwires disguised as garden gnomes. Karen materialized on her porch, arms crossed, radiating disapproval like a human heat lamp set to judgmental. Her floral print sundress, usually a beacon of suburban cheer, today looked like camouflage designed for ambushing unsuspecting neighbors. "Morning, Karen," I chirped, forcing a smile that felt like stretching cold taffy. "Beautiful day for existing near my own driveway, isn't it?" My internal monologue was less polite. Here we go. Round 5,872 of the Great Driveway Border Skirmish. "Your tire," she declared, pointing a finger that trembled with righteous indignation, "is practically breathing on my azaleas. It's blocking the ambient sunlight they require between 8 a.m. and 8:15 a.m. Do you have any consideration whatsoever?" I leaned out the window, squinting dramatically. My tire, breathing, on her azaleas, which were, I noted for the 1,000th time, a good 10 feet away, safely ensconced behind her pristine white picket fence. A fence which, ironically, probably did block more sunlight than my tire ever could. Is my tire asthmatic? I wondered internally. Should I check its tread pressure? Maybe offer it an inhaler? And since when do azaleas photosynthesize based on a 15-minute window dictated by the position of a parked car? Does she have tiny chlorophyll timers wired to each petal? "Karen," I said, adopting my most reasonable, patient tone, the one that usually preceded me wanting to scream into a pillow. "I assure you I'm parked legally. On my property. There's ample space. Birds could nest between my car and your fence. Small mammals could frolic." "Ample space is subjective," she shot back, her voice rising. "It feels too close. It's causing me distress. Visual clutter. I can feel my property values plummeting with every rotation of your intrusive wheel." Intrusive wheel? My car wasn't even moving. "I'm going to have to document this," she announced, as if revealing a state secret. "Again." She whipped out her smartphone, the one seemingly surgically attached to her hand, and began snapping pictures. Not just straight-on shots, oh no, she crouched, angled, zoomed. She probably got shots of my undercarriage, my tire tread pattern, maybe even a stray French fry I dropped last week. For the file, you understand. The Karen Archive of Neighborhood Transgressions. Before I could even unbuckle my seatbelt, she marched over, slapped a freshly laminated note under my windshield wiper, gave my hood a final glare as if it had personally insulted her ancestors, and retreated back to her porch fortress. I sighed, the sound rattling in my chest. I pulled the note free. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive artistry. Bullet points, arrows, a crudely drawn diagram showing my car, labeled offending vehicle, practically mounting her mailbox, which was nowhere near the driveway. It cited violations of visual harmony, neighborly consideration, and potential root system interference. For the azaleas, naturally. Laminated, because of course it was. Rain or shine, the documentation must survive. This was it, the final straw, the microscopic particle that broke the camel's back after a lifetime of pebble loading. You have to understand, this wasn't an isolated incident. This was a campaign, a relentless, soul-crushing war of attrition waged over inches of asphalt and blades of grass, Our driveways, you see, are classic suburban twins, side by side, separated by a strip of lawn maybe 3 feet wide. My lawn, technically, according to the property survey I'd had done specifically because of her, but that little detail never seemed to register. It started small. Notes about my car washing technique. "The mist drifts," she'd wailed one Saturday, clutching her pearls, or the suburban equivalent, probably a tasteful LL Bean tote bag. "My hydrangeas are sensitive to unfiltered hose water." Then came the guest parking debacle. Any friend who dared park on the public street within 50 feet of her house was met with narrowed eyes and pointed suggestions about utilizing the visitor parking 3 blocks away. "That's my spot," she'd declared about a patch of public curb, apparently claimed through sheer force of will. There was the infamous recycling bin incident of 23, where I left my blue bin out until 9 a.m. instead of the HOA-mandated 8 a.m. pickup, resulting in a formal complaint about unsightly refuse lingering. There was the time I trimmed my side of the hedge separating our backyards, and she accused me of foliage aggression and compromising the hedge's emotional stability. I'd tried reasoning, I'd tried ignoring, I'd tried malicious compliance, parking so far over on my side that I could barely open my driver's side door. Didn't matter. If the car wasn't too close, it was angled suspiciously, or casting an oppressive shadow. "I swear, honey," I vented to my wife, Sarah, later that evening, swirling the ice in my glass with more force than necessary. "I could park this thing in the next zip code, beamed up by Scotty, and she'd complain my transporter waves were interfering with her Wi-Fi signal." Sarah patted my hand sympathetically. "She's dedicated," she offered diplomatically. "Maybe we could plant a really fast-growing shrub on the property line." "A shrub?" I scoffed. She'd complained the roots were tunneling under her foundation with malicious intent. No, this requires something bigger. Something definitive. Later that night, unable to sleep, fueled by righteous indignation and cheap whiskey, I found myself doom-scrolling. Neighbor dispute solutions, soundproofing azaleas, legal ways to annoy Karen, the usual desperate searches. Then, nestled between ads for noise-canceling fences and mediation services, I saw it. An article titled, "Luxury Car Turntables, the Ultimate Garage Accessory." It showed sleek, low-profile platforms seamlessly integrated into polished concrete floors, rotating gleaming Ferraris and Porsches with silent, hydraulic grace. I laughed out loud. Imagine a rotating driveway. Just spin the car, point the offending tires away from her precious sightline, aim the exhaust firmly towards my own rose bushes. She couldn't complain then, could she? The sheer, glorious absurdity of it hit me like a rogue sprinkler head. Wait. The laughter died in my throat. Could I actually do that? The seed wasn't just planted. It sprouted, unfurled leaves, and started demanding fertilizer. I dove deeper. Forget luxury garages. Were there residential driveway turntables? My fingers flew across the keyboard. Holy crap. They existed. Companies installed these things in regular driveways. For space constraints, yes, but also, well, the websites were coy, but the implication was there. For dealing with situations. Situations like Karen. They exist, I whispered, eyes wide, illuminated by the screen's glow. People actually buy these things. Rich people, probably, or people with neighbors named Karen. The price tags were astronomical. Enough to make my sensible sedan weep oil. But the image? Oh, the image. Me, stepping out of my car, hitting a button on a remote, and watching my vehicle majestically pivot away from her accusing gaze. The sheer, unadulterated spite of it. It was beautiful. It was poetic. It was necessary. Operation Spin Cycle was officially underway. The next morning, armed with coffee and newfound purpose, I began the quest for contractors. This wasn't exactly a standard Yellow Pages lookup. My first call was to a high-end construction firm whose website featured minimalist mansions and infinity pools. "Good morning, Apex Construction. How may I direct your call?" The voice was smooth, professional, probably belonged to someone wearing Italian leather shoes. "Hi," I began, trying to sound casual, like I inquired about driveway turntables every Tuesday. "I'm interested in getting a quote for a residential driveway turntable installation." A pause. A beat of silence that stretched just long enough to be awkward. "A what now?" the voice asked, losing some of its smoothness. "Like for a car show, a dealership?" No, I said quickly. "For my driveway, at my house, to facilitate easier egress and enhance neighborly relations." "Smooth, Dave. Real smooth." "Right." Another pause. I could almost hear him mentally calculating the likelihood of me being a prank caller versus merely eccentric. "Look, buddy, those things are complex. Major excavation, hydraulics, reinforced concrete, dedicated power lines, sophisticated electronics. You're talking tens of thousands, minimum. Is your driveway really that hard to get out of?" "It's not the getting out," I explained, feeling a familiar surge of frustration. "It's the staying put, without causing existential distress to the adjacent property owner via perceived proximity violations." A heavy sigh crackled through the phone line. "Okay, look, ballpark? Minimum $50,000. Probably closer to 75 by the time we factor in permits, soil reports, and the sheer novelty factor. Plus, we have a 6-month wait list for anything non-standard, and you'll need permits out the wazoo from the city, maybe even the HOA. Still interested?" The hope that I would say no was practically dripping from his words. 75 grand. I swallowed hard. That was a lot of money. That was a new car. That was a really nice vacation. That was college tuition for a hypothetical future child. 75 grand to never hear Karen complain about my parking again? "Possibly," I said, surprising even myself. "Let me get back to you." I hung up, slightly dazed. The price was staggering, but the vision was priceless. My next few calls were similar. Disbelief, exorbitant quotes, warnings about complexity. I was starting to feel discouraged. Maybe this was just a pipe dream, an expensive fantasy fueled by spite. Then I found them. Spin Masters, Inc. We put your driveway in a spin. Their website was something else. Garish colors, spinning car graphics, low-res GIFs, naturally, and testimonials that read like fever dreams. "My cul-de-sac was a nightmare. Now, thanks to Spin Masters, I rotate my RV with ease. Brenda, Ohio. Needed to point my classic Corvette away from the morning sun. Barry fixed me right up. Chet, Florida. Barry, the owner apparently." I dialed the number, half expecting a dial-up modem sound. "Spin Masters, Barry speaking. You spin 'em, we win 'em." The voice was loud, cheerful, and sounded like it was fueled by pure, unadulterated enthusiasm and possibly several energy drinks. Hi, Barry," I said. "I saw your website. I'm interested in a driveway rotator?" "A driveway rotator," Barry boomed. "Brilliant. Fantastic. Most people just want epoxy flooring these days. Boring. Or maybe a little paver work. Snoozeville, you, sir, are a visionary, a pioneer of pavement pivoting. So, what's the story? Tight turn? Awkward slope? Multi-car shuffle? Or—" He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Neighbor issue?" He practically winked through the phone. I hesitated for a second, then spilled. The parking wars, the notes, the azaleas, the breathing tire. Barry listened intently, interjecting with sympathetic clucks and outraged gasps. "Karen, you say?" he mused when I finished. "Oh, I've installed for Karens before. Or rather, because of Karens. Different names, same species. Masters of the millimeter. Guardians of the imaginary line. Don't you worry, Dave, my boy. Barry's got your back. And your front. And potentially your sides, depending on the rotation angle." He agreed to come out for a site visit the next day. Promptly at 9 a.m., a van painted an eye-watering shade of lime green, emblazoned with a cartoon car spinning on a plate, pulled up to my curb. Barry hopped out. He was a short, stout man with a tool belt slung low on his hips, a beaming smile, and eyes that twinkled with manic energy. He surveyed the scene. My driveway, Karen's driveway, the infamous strip of grass. Karen, naturally, was already stationed at her window, arms crossed, observing the proceedings like a hawk monitoring a field mouse. Barry gave her a cheerful, oblivious wave. She didn't wave back. "Oh, yeah," Barry declared, rubbing his hands together after taking measurements and poking at the ground with a screwdriver. "Piece of cake." Well, a complicated, multi-layered cake requiring heavy machinery and precise engineering, but cake nonetheless. We'll have to dig up most of this front section. He gestured vaguely at my lawn, probably looking at a 6-foot pit. Need to pour a serious concrete base, run conduit for the power, install the hydraulic pump over here. He chattered on, outlining the process with infectious glee. "It'll be glorious," he proclaimed. "A symphony of suburban engineering. Your neighbor's gonna love it." The sarcasm was thick enough to spread on toast. His quote was still high, enough to make my wallet whimper, but significantly less than Apex Construction's go-away price. More importantly, Barry got it. He understood the mission. He wasn't just installing a turntable, he was deploying a tactical solution in a long-running neighborhood Cold War. "Let's do it, Barry," I said, shaking his hand. "Let's make my driveway spin." "Excellent," Barry beamed. "Now about those permits." Ah, yes, permits. The bureaucratic Everest I now had to climb. Barry, bless his enthusiastic heart, provided the technical drawings and specifications, but navigating the labyrinthine corridors of the city planning department and the even more treacherous terrain of the homeowners association fell to me. Forms. So many forms. Forms filled out in triplicate, demanding details I couldn't possibly know. Soil composition, drainage gradients, decibel ratings of the proposed hydraulic pump. I felt like I needed an engineering degree just to apply. There were fees, processing delays, requests for clarification that seemed designed purely to induce despair. And then Karen found out. How? I suspect she has moles within the HOA, or perhaps she simply monitors the city permit database with the diligence of a Cold War spy. The emails started flooding the HOA board's inbox. Subject lines screamed, "Urgent, structural integrity threat. Noise pollution imminent. Proposed driveway monstrosity will lower property values. Unnatural rotation hazard." She demanded an emergency virtual HOA meeting, which, naturally, was granted. I logged in, steeling myself. There she was, framed in her perfect living room, a portrait of concerned citizenship radiating from her webcam. And this monstrosity," Karen was saying, her voice trembling with carefully modulated outrage, "will be an eyesore, a blight on our peaceful community, a constant source of mechanical noise. And what about safety? What if it malfunctions? What if it spins his car uncontrollably into my prize-winning petunias?" I unmuted myself. "Brenda, it's Dave. First, the turntable is a permitted, professionally installed driveway enhancement designed for convenience and, frankly, to ensure my vehicle remains undeniably on my own property. Barry assures me the noise levels are minimal, well within ordinance limits." "And Karen," I added, unable to resist, "your petunias are safe. The rotation radius is entirely within my property lines, as per the submitted plans. It physically cannot reach your flower bed unless it achieves escape velocity, which seems unlikely. A long-suffering sigh came from Bill, the HOA president, a retired accountant who looked permanently exhausted. "Mr. Henderson," he said, rubbing his temples, "Miss Peterson. As long as the permits are approved by the city planning department and the installation meets all setback requirements and architectural guidelines, which, on paper, it appears to do, the board's ability to intervene based on aesthetic objections to driveway surfaces is somewhat limited. Translation? Please make this stop." Karen looked like she might spontaneously combust, but Bill was right. Weeks later, after more paperwork, another fee, and probably a site visit from a bewildered city inspector, the permits were approved, stamped, official, irrevocable. The victory felt monumental. Karen's subsequent glare, observed from across the lawn, could have curdled milk. Then came the big dig. The excavator arrived on a Monday morning, rumbling down our quiet suburban street like a mechanical beast of the apocalypse. The noise was impressive. A deep, earth-shattering roar, accompanied by the screech of metal tracks on asphalt. Within an hour, the pristine rectangle of my front lawn was transformed into a scene resembling the Battle of the Somme. Mud, rocks, severed sprinkler lines. Karen was outside instantly, phone held high, documenting the carnage. "This is unacceptable," she yelled over the din, though the excavator operator couldn't possibly hear her. "The vibrations. They're rattling my commemorative plates. My cat is traumatized." Barry's crew, a motley but efficient bunch, largely ignored her. They were professionals, clearly accustomed to collateral Karen damage. She tried interrogating them during their coffee break. "What exactly are you doing here?" she demanded, hands on her hips. "Is this even legal? Do you have the proper insurance?" A burly worker named Sal, calmly chewing gum, just pointed towards the permit sign Barry had dutifully posted. "Installing a driveway feature, ma'am. Got the permits right here. Fully insured. All above board." "A driveway feature?" she scoffed. "It looks like you're digging a bunker." Sal just shrugged. 6-foot pit, ma'am. Standard for the rotator base." Predictably, Karen called the police. 2 officers arrived, their patrol car navigating slowly past the piles of dirt. They looked profoundly unimpressed. This wasn't exactly a high-crime emergency. "Ma'am," Officer Miller, whose name tag I could just make out, said patiently. "You called about a construction project?" "It's unreasonable," Karen insisted, gesturing wildly at the hole. "It's shaking my entire house. Look at this mess. It's a safety hazard. What if a child falls in?" Never mind that Barry's crew had already put up temporary safety fencing. I stepped forward, holding copies of the permits like a shield. "Officers, good morning. It's fully permitted work, all happening during legal construction hours. Just a standard driveway modification." Barry, ever the cheerful diplomat, chimed in. "Just a bit of digging for the foundation. We'll be as quick and tidy as we can. Standard procedure for this kind of upgrade." Officer Davies, Miller's partner, addressed Karen directly. "Ma'am, if they have the permits and they're working within the city's noise ordinance hours, there's really nothing illegal happening here. It's a civil matter regarding property disruption." Karen sputtered, clearly expecting them to shut down the operation and haul Barry away in handcuffs. The officers gave us a nod, advised Karen again to only call 911 for actual emergencies, and drove off, leaving a cloud of dust and thwarted indignation in their wake. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated, righteous satisfaction. Score 1 for Team Dave. Karen retreated to her porch, fuming, probably already composing her next email to the HOA. The installation itself wasn't without its hiccups, providing ample entertainment for the increasingly curious neighbors. Day 2 saw an unexpected geyser erupt when the excavator nicked a previously unknown sprinkler line, thoroughly soaking Karen's sidewalk, and, satisfyingly, the hem of her pants as she stood documenting. Day 4 involved the delivery truck bringing the wrong hydraulic motor. "This is for the Spin Master 500, Barry exclaimed, holding up a comparatively small metal object. "The Mini Cooper model. You've got the 750 XL package, Dave, for SUVs, sedans, light trucks. This thing wouldn't rotate a unicycle." Cue frantic phone calls and express shipping charges. Then came the inevitable afternoon thunderstorm, turning the 6-foot pit into a muddy brown swimming pool. Barry remained remarkably upbeat through it all, wading in with hip waders to check the drainage pump, muttering about character-building challenges. I mostly stayed out of the way, offering coffee, making unhelpful suggestions, maybe more gravel, and documenting the chaos for my own amusement. The neighborhood buzz intensified. My immediate neighbors, the Millers on the other side, were cautiously amused. "Seriously, Dave?" Tom Miller asked over the fence one evening, surveying the mud pit. "A turntable? Couldn't you just, back out?" "Where's the fun in that, Tom?" I grinned. "Besides, think of the resale value. Bespoke driveway features." Others were less supportive, whispering conspiratorially with Karen on her porch, casting disapproving glances towards the construction zone. "It is a bit much, don't you think?" I overheard Mrs. Gable from down the street murmur. "Seems rather aggressive." The local kids, however, were fascinated. They'd gather at a safe distance after school, watching the machinery, asking Barry's crew questions. My driveway had become the most exciting thing on the block since the squirrel learned how to open the squirrel-proof bird feeder. Finally, after nearly 2 weeks of noise, mud, and minor setbacks, the day arrived. The concrete was cured, the hydraulics were bled, the electrical connections were triple-checked. The sleek, dark gray metal disc sat perfectly flush with the surrounding new concrete of my driveway. It looked surprisingly normal, actually, until you knew what it did. Barry stood beside me, holding a remote control that looked like it could launch satellites. "Okay, Dave," he said, his eyes gleaming. "Moment of truth. Drive on up, nice and slow, center it on the disc." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the culmination of weeks of planning, expense, and neighborly warfare. I eased my sedan onto the platform, guided by Barry's hand signals. The car settled with a slight bump. "All right," Barry said. "Gentle pressure on the rotate clockwise button, the one with the little swirly arrow." I took a deep breath. My thumb hovered over the button. Karen was watching. Of course she was watching. From her living room window, partially obscured by lace curtains, but definitely watching. I pressed the button. There was a low hum, a slight shudder beneath the tires, and then it moved. Smoothly, almost silently. The platform began to turn. My car, my ordinary sedan, was rotating on its own axis in the middle of my driveway. It was surreal. It was magnificent. "Woohoo!" Barry cheered. "Look at that! Smooth as butter!" I was grinning like an idiot. It worked. It actually worked. I kept pressing the button, rotating a full 180 degrees until the car faced the street, ready for a perfect exit. Then, feeling cocky, I spun it back the other way, and maybe a little too far. The front bumper ended up pointing directly at Karen's prize-winning petunias, albeit still safely on my side of the property line. "Whoa there, cowboy," Barry chuckled. "Easy on the spin cycle." I frantically corrected it, bringing the car back to a neutral, forward-facing position. Okay, I thought, maybe there's a slight learning curve. Note to self, avoid the dramatic rotation setting when Karen is observing. From her window, I could just make out Karen's expression. It wasn't anger, it was disbelief. And maybe, just maybe, a flicker of grudging awe. Or possibly apoplectic rage. Hard to tell from this distance. Mastering the turntable became my new hobby. I practiced rotating clockwise, counterclockwise, stopping precisely at 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees. I developed a feel for the remote, the subtle momentum of the platform. And then I started using it, ostentatiously, every single time I parked, every single time I left. Pull in, center the car, hit the remote, the low hum, the smooth pivot. If Karen was outside watering her perfectly safe azaleas or retrieving her mail, I'd give her a polite little wave as my car majestically turned its backside towards her property line. I made sure to park perfectly centered, inches from the imaginary line she held so dear, then rotate a full 180 degrees, presenting the vehicle's front end neatly towards the street. Undeniably convenient. Undeniably not pointing at her house. My internal monologue narrated these moments with smug satisfaction. See, Karen? Look how considerate I am. My taillights now face your domain. No aggressive headlights blinding your delicate sensibilities. Just the passive, unthreatening rear of my vehicle. Of course, peace was never truly an option in Karen's world. Thwarted on the proximity front, she simply shifted her line of attack. The complaints mutated. First, it was the noise. "That whirring sound," she complained to Brenda Miller over the fence, loud enough for me to overhear while pretending to inspect my mailbox. "It's faint, yes, but it's persistent. It disrupts my afternoon meditation. It has a very unsettling frequency." The turntable was, in fact, remarkably quiet, quieter than her lawnmower, certainly. Then came the reflections. At precisely 4:37 p.m., read the next laminated note left on my doorstep, the sun reflects off the metallic surface of your contraption at an angle that creates a blinding glare directly into my kitchen window. It interfered with my ability to properly monitor my sourdough starter. It was attracting undue attention. Apparently, the neighborhood kids finding my driveway more interesting than TikTok was a violation of community standards. She even tried suggesting it might be leaking hydraulic fluid, potentially contaminating the groundwater and endangering the local squirrel population. Barry assured me the system was sealed tighter than Fort Knox. This led, inevitably, to Police Interaction #2. It was 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Sarah and I were watching some mind-numbing reality show when flashing blue and red lights painted the living room walls. I sighed. Showtime. I opened the door to find Officers Miller and Davies back on my porch, looking even more tired than during their last visit. "Evening, Mr. Henderson," Officer Miller said, his voice flat. "Getting complaints about noise again, from your, driveway device." "My turntable?" I asked, genuinely perplexed. "Officers, I haven't used it since I got home from work around 5 p.m. It's been sitting silently ever since." Right on cue, Karen appeared on her porch, wrapped in a bathrobe, her hair in curlers. "I heard it," she declared shrilly. "Just minutes ago, a distinct mechanical whirring. It woke me up. It kept me awake." Officer Davies shone his flashlight onto the turntable, sitting inert and silent in the driveway. "Ma'am, with all due respect, it's not moving. There's no noise coming from it now." "It was whirring earlier," Karen insisted. "Intermittently. Maybe it's malfunctioning." Officer Miller pinched the bridge of his nose. He looked at me, then at Karen, then back at me. He leaned in slightly. "Look, sir," he murmured. "Just try to keep the peace, okay? Be considerate with the spinning." He turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, please only call 911 for actual emergencies or ongoing disturbances. We can't respond to intermittent whirring that isn't currently happening." They left, their patrol car's lights receding down the street. I felt another surge of victory, mixed with a healthy dose of, "Is this really my life now?" Karen stood on her porch, silhouetted by her porch light, radiating pure, unadulterated fury. The whirring, I suspected, had originated entirely within her own imagination. The annual neighborhood block party, usually a pleasant affair involving lukewarm potato salad and slightly awkward conversations, was held a few weeks later. This year, however, there was a new, unspoken centerpiece: my driveway turntable. It was the elephant in the cul-de-sac. People kept glancing at it, whispering, occasionally asking me questions with poorly concealed amusement. "So, Dave," chuckled Tom Miller, handing me a beer, "how's the spin cycle treating you?" "Never better, Tom," I grinned. "Parking's a breeze, egress is facilitated. Neighborly relations are rotating." Karen, predictably, was holding court near the dessert table, likely recounting tales of vibrational plate damage and blinding sunset glares. I saw Mrs. Gable nodding sympathetically. Maybe it was the beer. Maybe it was the weeks of pent-up frustration. Maybe it was seeing Karen spread her anti-turntable propaganda. But a glorious, terrible idea sparked in my mind. "Hey, everyone," I called out, perhaps a bit too loudly. "Having trouble maneuvering out of these tight street parking spots?" I gestured towards my driveway with a flourish. "Allow me to demonstrate the future of suburban convenience." Before anyone could react, I jogged over to my car, parked neatly on the street. I hopped in, started the engine, and drove it carefully onto the turntable. With half the neighborhood watching, I grabbed the remote from my pocket and hit the button. The low hum filled the momentary silence. My car began its majestic rotation, 180 degrees, smooth as silk. I stopped it perfectly facing the street. "See?" I announced, getting out and taking a mock bow. "Effortless. Anyone need help turning around? Driveway's open. Plenty of spin to go around." That did it. Karen marched over, her face thunderous. Brenda Miller tried to intercept her, murmuring something placating, but Karen brushed past her. "David Henderson," she hissed, stopping directly in front of me, oblivious to the awkward silence that had fallen over the partygoers. "This is utterly ridiculous. You are making a mockery of this neighborhood. This thing," she gestured violently at the turntable, "is unsafe, unsightly, and frankly, deeply passive-aggressive." "Passive-aggressive?" I countered, feeling the beer embolden me. "Karen, this is peak active problem-solving. You complained about my parking proximity. My car is now demonstrably distant when parked. You implied difficulty maneuvering. My car now pivots with balletic grace. What's the issue?" "The issue," she sputtered, "is that it's lowered my property value." "Actually," piped up a voice from behind me. It was Barry, who had apparently crashed the block party drawn by the siren song of rotating machinery, or maybe just the free hot dogs. "Unique, high-end features like the Spin Master 750 XL can often increase property value. It's practically bespoke engineering." He beamed, oblivious to the tension. "What if it spins out of control?" Karen demanded, ignoring Barry. "What if it launches your car into orbit?" "It has multiple safety sensors, emergency shutoffs, and is rated for 10 tons, Karen," I said calmly. "Probably safer than your aggressive pruning shears near the property line, frankly." The standoff was reaching peak absurdity. Neighbors were shuffling their feet, pretending to be intensely interested in their paper plates. Then inspiration struck again. Malicious, beautiful inspiration. "Look," I said, adopting my most reasonable tone. "Let me show you. I'll park exactly how you always complained about, right on the edge." Her eyes narrowed suspiciously, but the lure of proving her point was too strong. I got back in my car, drove it onto the turntable, and painstakingly positioned the passenger side tires right on the edge of the disc, mimicking the exact parking position that had launched 1,000 laminated notes. "There," I said, getting out. "Too close?" "Yes, obviously," she snapped. "Okay then," I said, raising the remote. "Observe." With everyone watching, Tom Miller, Mrs. Gable, the kids, Barry, and especially Karen, I pressed the button. The turntable hummed to life. Slowly, deliberately, magnificently, my car rotated 180 degrees. It came to a perfect stop, facing the street, the offending passenger side now nestled safely near the center of my driveway, miles away, figuratively speaking, from her precious property line. I turned to Karen, spread my hands wide, and gave another, slightly deeper mock bow. "See? Problem solved." For a moment, there was dead silence. Then, Tom Miller snorted, trying to stifle a laugh. Someone else chuckled. Karen stood there, mouth slightly agape, her face cycling through shades of red and white. She looked from the perfectly parked car to me, to the amused faces of her neighbors. She opened her mouth, closed it again. She was speechless. Utterly, gloriously speechless. Without another word, she turned on her heel and marched back towards her house, shoulders stiff, radiating defeat. The screen door slammed shut behind her. Barry clapped me on the shoulder. "Textbook execution, Dave, textbook!" The rest of the block party was slightly less awkward. People seemed relieved the tension had broken, albeit in such a bizarre fashion. The turntable was still the main topic, but now the tone was more amusement than judgment. I felt a profound sense of peace. I had faced the dragon, not slain it, but perhaps rotated it into submission. Life settled into a new, slightly surreal normal. Karen still lived next door, of course. She didn't suddenly become friendly. The glares continued, though perhaps with slightly less intensity. She found other things to complain about. The height of my sunflowers, the frequency of my Amazon deliveries, the suspiciously cheerful whistling of my mailman. But the driveway? The parking? Silence. Blessed, beautiful, $75,000 silence. The turntable became just part of the routine. Pull in, rotate, park, leave, rotate, drive away. Sometimes I'd catch other neighbors watching, a small smile playing on their lips. The kids still thought it was cool. There were minor downsides. The electricity bill definitely ticked up a notch. And Barry was right about the maintenance. The hydraulics needed checking every 6 months, a task performed by Barry himself with the solemnity of a brain surgeon. And one drizzly Tuesday, it developed an annoying, intermittent squeak. "Just needs a little lithium grease in the main bearing," Barry diagnosed cheerfully during his next visit, sounding slightly disappointed it wasn't a more complex issue. As I stood there, watching Barry meticulously apply grease to the inner workings of my absurdly expensive driveway accessory, I looked over at Karen's house. The curtains twitched. Was it worth it? The cost, the hassle, the sheer ridiculousness of it all. I pulled into the driveway later that day after work. No sign of Karen. I centered the car on the disc, hit the remote. The low hum, the smooth rotation. Squeak. Damn. Need to remind Barry about that squeak. I got out, locked the car, and glanced towards her window again. The curtain twitched, definitely. I smirked. "Yep," I muttered to myself, heading towards my front door. Totally worth it. Then I paused. Mostly. Inside, Sarah was already pulling out takeout menus. "Honey?" I called out. "Did you remember to schedule the turntable guy for that squeak?" "He's coming Thursday," she replied, without looking up. "Right after the guy who fixes the sprinkler line we definitely didn't hit again while planting those new bushes." I just shook my head and smiled. Suburban life. You gotta learn to rotate with the punches.